Welcome to Stocking the Pantry, a CalFresh Healthy Living podcast from Leahs Pantry, where we share fresh thoughts and fruitful conversations. On this show, we discuss any and all things community nutrition, food equity, and nutrition security. This is a space for thought leaders to share success stories and strategies for equity-centered and resilience-building initiatives. We hope to foster collaboration and community, as well as leverage strengths among listeners, guests, and hosts as we share ideas and dreams of building a more equitable future where everyone has access to healthful, nourishing food.
Hello, my name is T, and I'll be one of your hosts for the Stocking the Pantry podcast. A little about myself: I'm a program coordinator for the training department at Leahs Pantry and a practicing nutritionist who lives in the gorgeous Mojave Desert with my beautiful partner of 16 years and our rescue tortoise, Poppy Tortellini. I am an absolute lover of science, travel, food, and family, which has greatly impacted my purpose in life. My upbringing and exposure was diverse to include being born and raised in Hamburg, California, and it was a mecca for some of the most delicious cuisine, hands down, as well as an abundant food as medicine scene. Through life experience and following my passion, I ended up getting a bachelor's of science in athletic training from the University of Laverne, which is where I met my partner, and then eventually I obtained a master's of science in nutrition from the National University of Natural Medicine in Oregon. After graduating at the top of my class of an accelerated master's program while working full-time, talk about not knowing what sleep is, but all worth the while because it really opened up doors and guided me into a variety of professional opportunities from the higher education sector to now Leahs Pantry, which I must say is so rewarding to be a part of an organization that fosters a rich trauma-informed culture where leveraging my strengths while supporting opportunities for me to blossom and grow is the norm. Look, I could talk about this all day, but we'll save it for next time. I look forward to embarking on this new podcast journey together with you. And remember, if you want your world to change, your words must change.
Hey everyone, I'm your co-host, Colby D'Onofrio. I come from a background of nutrition, fitness, and food banking with a sprinkle of 1960s hippie ideals and a desire to leave the world at least a little better than I found it. I am a program coordinator for our Nutrition Pantry program here at Leahs Pantry, and I'm coming to you all from beautiful Berkeley, California. I've always loved to cook, grow and harvest food, share meals, and geek out about food science. This love of food pushed me to pursue a bachelor's in health sciences with a nutrition concentration from Ithaca College. But there are so many important and interesting aspects of food beyond the hard sciences and calories in, calories out. The role food plays in each of our lives can't be boiled down into one equation for health. So first out of college, I went into the fitness and sports nutrition field, working as a personal trainer in New York State and then Northern California. As a longtime athlete, I love sharing knowledge around exercise and the role that diet plays in reaching fitness goals, but there was something missing. I knew that some of the people who might benefit most from exercise and nutrition counseling were the people who didn't have the time, the money, the transportation, or whatever resource to hire a personal trainer. I didn't want to work in a field where health was a commodity only for those who could afford it. So I switched gears and took a job with my local food bank as their nutrition educator. And I loved it. I loved interacting with and being of service to my community members and the way customers' faces would light up when they received a bag of fresh local produce. The way farmers and neighbors came by our distributions to drop off extras from their fields or gardens, and then to be able to turn that around and give it right to someone in the same community ignited something inside of me, or maybe it met a need within me that had been previously unfulfilled. And then in the spring of 2022, I saw that Leahs Pantry was hiring. I didn't fully know what I was getting myself into, but I knew that this was an organization talking about the relationship between trauma and food and community and how to build nourishing lives and resilient communities. I thought, that's where I want to be. And luckily the hiring team thought the same. So now I am the program coordinator of our Nutrition Pantry program, also referred to as NPP. I still get to work in the food bank and pantry realm, which I love, and I get to talk about more than just recipe cards or informational handouts, which are great, don't get me wrong, and I do still get to talk about these things. But I also get to teach empathy, compassion, and the importance of relationships in healing our severed world and broken food system. Food is so much more than calories. It is a vehicle for healing, connection, and community, and I am beyond grateful to have a job and now a podcast where we get to spread these ideas far and wide. Today we are talking with Adrienne and Monica about the creation and background of Leahs Pantry. We will cover what it means to be trauma-informed, how that came to be a key aspect of the organization, and the importance of quality relationships.
Monica Background is a trainer, community educator, and program manager at Leahs Pantry. She has been with Leahs Pantry since 2013, and during this time, she introduced the translation of trauma-informed principles into food and nutrition programs. Her primary efforts now are to build trauma-informed curricula for use in CalFresh Healthy Living or other SNAP-Ed programs and healthcare settings. She is based in San Francisco and has a master's degree in food studies from New York University and has been a professional cook.
Adrienne Markworth is Executive Director of Leahs Pantry, the organization she founded in San Francisco in 2006. Over the past 16 years, she's had the opportunity to teach, write, train, present, and collaborate across different settings and sectors, moving her work and the organization's efforts towards equity and trauma-informed nutrition security. She's worked in different areas of the CalFresh Healthy Living program, including subcontractor, local agency, and state-funded partner. Leahs Pantry is also a training provider for SNAP-Ed programs across the country. Adrienne lives in the San Diego area with her husband, 3 children, and a golden doodle named Taco. We are here with Adrienne Markworth and Monica Background. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'd like to kick our conversation off today with a bit of a discussion about the origin of Leahs Pantry. Can y'all share a little bit about that?
Sure. Leahs Pantry started in 2006, although the idea started in probably 2005. I had the opportunity of being an advisor for a group of Jesuit volunteers that were working in San Francisco, and at the same time had a new baby and was doing some work in baby food and homemade baby food. And I just learned a lot from the volunteers at the time about what was happening in terms of supporting people when they had babies, and they might be recovering from homelessness or in shelters. And at the time in San Francisco, there was not a ton going on that was supporting parents to feed their children well. So I had an opportunity through the Golden Gate Mothers Group, which I was a part of as a new mom, and I was in charge of their service projects, and just had an offhand conversation with one of the interns at a affordable housing long-term transitional housing site in San Francisco about this. And I said, I think it would be really fun to come in and work with parents about making their own baby food and feeding. And, and they said, great, that sounds good. Let me connect you with the executive director. And so it worked. I went home, I started to write a curriculum, I started doing some fundraising, and really just had an amazingly rich and informative and community building time working with the parents at Clara House and learning from them and watching them support each other, and also providing, resources and skills myself. And so that's really how Food Smarts was born in San Francisco. And after that, it started to gather a little bit of interest from other homeless shelters in San Francisco. And then we very quickly got into affordable housing, which is a contract we still have with Bridge Housing, doing cooking and nutrition workshops for people of all ages. So not just young parents, but kids and parents and seniors, speaking lots of different languages, coming from lots of different cultures and backgrounds. And the fun thing about doing that was that I had to quickly hire other people to help across the state, which then just spurred kind of a model of collaboration and listening and everybody kind of joining together to figure out what was working in community. So that's the story of Food Smarts, which is also the story of Leahs Pantry, since that's all we had back then.
Wow, I love that. Thank you so much for giving us that insight. I want to take it one step further and let me open this both up to you and or Monica. How did you first draw the connection between nutrition insecurity and trauma-informed approaches?
I had been working in public housing here in San Francisco at a garden-based nutrition after-school program. And actually, during that time, when I first started working there, Adrienne, you and I crossed paths, and I didn't realize it until I started working at Leahs Pantry, because I came and did a little cooking demo at one of your children's school events. And I do remember you in the audience. So that's what I was doing. And because it's public housing, violence was very present in the community, and I just, having also a new child, was more aware of how important early childhood or child development is, and was paying attention to what was happening in the community and how that was impacting the children's ability to engage fruitfully in a program, learn things, experience things, be present for the activities. And there was so much going on in their lives that was really difficult and challenging. At the same time, the program offered a really wonderful respite for the kids to have a safe space and to decompress from what was going outside the walls of the program. So I just became really interested in how trauma was affecting children's lives and how programs could be used to not just encourage them to connect to nature and to food, but to feel safe and connected and to get more out of a program, because sometimes we have expectations for our programming and we might not look at the context that it's happening in enough to really make it, a really good experience for participants.
Specifically within Leahs Pantry, we had an opportunity to continue our partnership with Bridge Housing. It's interesting because initially Bridge said, "Oh, thanks, but no thanks" on Potrero. We have a dedicated educator. It's really important for us to have the same person in the room. They were experimenting with a model they were calling trauma-informed community building at the time. And Monica and I ended up going to a meeting there and talking with them about what they needed. And they said, "Listen, our educator just left and we're wondering whether Leahs Pantry would be able to step in." But it was just a different ask. It was not like the other workshops we'd been doing for that organization where 6 weeks at a time, here and there, it was very flexible. This was like, "No, we really want you guys to be here for 3 years. And not only that, we'd like it to be the same person." So that's a different request. And this was coming out of their trauma-informed principles translation into their very specific setting, was to be doing a redevelopment of a public housing project as well as running the programs and appreciating the destabilizing effect that all of that had on the residents. And so they were contractually required to offer program services, but they were also really aware of what the building impacts were. So they were very thoughtfully trying to align their programs with what was needed to keep the residents of Potrero feeling included and safe in the community, even as they might be asked to leave, or even as things might come up in rentals or the number of people in the houses, or, whatever, kind of the issues were. And at that time, I think Monica, drawing on the thinking that she'd already done about this issue, was able to stand up and say, "Yeah, I'll do it. I will commit to every single Thursday going to Potrero and being a relationship with the residents, not just being a service provider." And after that, I think she and I were both on the same page pretty quickly that there was quite an opportunity for us to look at the translation of this trauma-informed community building, all the SAMHSA principles, specifically into nutrition and food security. So it was nice to have that opportunity for such a specific and transparent request by a partner. I mean, it took a long time after that for us to really get where we needed to go, but it was very thoughtful work and it was hard work. And we were also busy doing a lot of other things at the organization. It wasn't as though we could just sort of stop and make this huge pivot. The actual official pivot didn't come until 2019, although we did start working very intensely in that area, probably starting in 2016.
Yeah. It was, a good synergy in that some of the conversation was starting to percolate in services, but not as heavily as it is now.
Yeah, that's very interesting and a great story to know. And so we had Leah's Pantry. You all were starting to talk a bit about this TI approach. So can you speak a bit about how the TI approach came to be a part of Leah's Pantry's vision, culture, and within the organizational structure as well?
Yeah, I think it came in phases. And initially, we did come in through programs. So the first thing Monica did was start to draft kind of a one-pager, which was the trauma-informed nutrition. And we would use that in our trainings. And then I think as she was doing a lot of that research, she was also pulling different assessments and different tools that had been used in the field to try and get a sense of what this looked like in organizations, in meetings, in hiring, in how we talk to one another. I think the first thing we did was we did form an internal subcommittee that Monica led to start working on this.
Yeah, I think when we started, like you said, thinking about how we would apply to programming, but also underlying that, fundamentally knowing that the system had to be able to support it. So we were simultaneously thinking about how do staff and agencies kind of interact with these principles, and how do they get, what structures are needed for a good implementation of a program. And our staff was very interested and curious about all of this. And I think we realized that how much staff and, the agency just needed to be kind of as trauma informed as much as our programming is. And we initiated, I think, subgroups, and then started kind of doing some trainings and conversations internally with each other to start to shape our own approach to how to develop our core competencies. And sort of not just that be like, we had started creating our curriculum around the table with an explicit kind of intention of bringing trauma-informed thinking into it, but realizing that we wanted to infuse this into other existing programs as well.
So I love that, you saw this opportunity. You were like, let's get everyone on board, and brought everybody to the table around this discussion. Now, are we practicing what we preach? Can you speak a little bit to the process of how trauma informed, yes, you were trailblazing the way programmatically, but did that also have to translate into becoming a trauma-informed organization as far as individually your staff adopting these principles that you were out there speaking about?
I think Monica was always really firm about processes having to be explicit if this stuff was going to work beyond just a group of people having a feeling that they wanted it to work. We didn't really start building processes initially, but we did hire, I guess it was right at the beginning of 2020, because this was happening kind of as COVID was unfolding as an organization. So this is like, almost 3 years ago. And we did hire 2 consultants that really helped us look at our mission and vision. And we're really just more our values. We had a group of values as Leah's Pantry that we'd adopted. And the question that the consultants brought to our staff was, are these values the right values? Are they reflective of your interest in moving towards a model of being a trauma-informed organization? And so they led us during a retreat through some investigation of that. And then out of that retreat came some values that were both aligned with trauma-informed care, but also aligned with Leah's Pantry, how we do our work, kind of the innovation that we bring, the enthusiasm we bring, the relationships, but it did really serve as a good grounding for the process discussions. And the other thing that they did that was helpful for us was we identified places where we might need to align better, places where we were aligning better. And then we were able to take that and say, okay, we have these values, we have these areas. How do we start building processes that are in alignment? And about that same time, we discovered appreciative inquiry. And that process of appreciative inquiry was really focusing on our organizational strengths and what we were already good at, and then building processes around that, which is good because if you're talking about your values, hopefully those are things that you're pretty good at. So I'd say it was fairly balanced between like an inductive and a deductive approach. Like we had this kind of deductive thinking of, here are the principles, we want them to filter down, here are our values, we want them to filter down. But then we also tackled really specific things. And then that ended up informing, oh, this is like how it could actually work. Here's all the little decisions we might be making on a day-to-day basis. An example I'll share, which I think has bore a lot of fruit organizationally. As the organization was growing, it became more and more important, was just transparency around project planning, right? Kicking off a project, debriefing a project. What were the roles and responsibilities? And saying like, okay, by not having a really explicit process, we were not really leveraging our strengths as an organization, right? There are people that are really, really activated when they have a lot of transparency. So we need to make sure we get that transparency built in right away. And so that was really instructive for me as a leader to watch my staff be able to develop these processes that were such a good fit for the organization, and then also go through a process of listening to themselves and not being too attached to it, right? Like, I don't think we hold too tightly to anything at Leahs Pantry. If it stops working, it's like, how do we go there? So I think that's one perspective on how we try to embed it in the organization.
Was there a framework that you could work off of when you started bringing these trauma-informed principles to the organization? Or was this kind of a figuring it out as you went along kind of process?
A lot of it came about because I just think Adrian's leadership style is inclusive already. And, that's an important part of trauma-informed principles. So like Adrian said, we had strengths in the organization, and that was definitely one of them. And we had a collaborative approach. So when we came up with processes, it was really much Adrian opening up, asking us to really put our recommendations forth, ask for what we needed, and collaborating on solutions that everyone had some input in and talking through what parts work for them, what we had flexibility around a process where people can adapt a process to work for their own individual work style. So we pay a lot of attention to our own work styles and talk about that. But also, what does the organization need to have kind of, a unified process around so we can kind of be efficient and move together. And I mean, that's been a process and it's always ongoing. I think, we want to make clear that like being trauma informed is not a state of being and it's not a fixed end. And it's just a practice we commit to and sort of have all felt really comfortable thinking about evolving and investigating and asking and being curious rather than checking off, did we do it right? Did we do it wrong? And kind of, we looked beyond sort of the top line check off and sort of ask ourselves a lot of questions when we make internal decisions.
And I think that also aligns with appreciative inquiry is, the language that we use drives the conversation. How you talk about something drives the direction. And I think that's part of what has continued to catalyze us as an organization is just this real belief that being grounded in appreciation and strengths while not shying away from discussing difficult things. And what trauma-informed practice has given me as a leader is just not only humility, but also strength to handle feedback differently, to evolve as a leader. So I notice now that when I receive feedback, I am much less, I guess, upset by it. And so Monica remembers back in the day, where I would have, and Leahs Pantry has been incredibly fortunate not to have a lot of drama as an organization, right? But every once in a while, a project goes sideways and you sort of have to deal, with the repercussions. And I think having the expectation before adopting a trauma-informed model of having to be perfect as a leader, perfect as an organization, especially as a new leader, not coming up through the nonprofit sector, just kind of doing things on my own. My standards are high and remain high. So nothing has changed about my standards, and certainly nothing has changed about Monica's standards either. I think we both have high professional standards. However, what has changed for me is like my internal reaction when I'm given an opportunity to improve. I no longer feel like I failed. I don't perseverate in the same way over things like what could I have done differently or as much frustration. I find I'm much stronger to move through a difficult challenge because I think that appreciative aspect keeps me moving forward instead of I want to go back and change the past. So that's been like a real benefit for me. And I think it's also benefited my personal life. And I hope I can model that as a leader. And I hope that I think most of our managers and directors, do a really good job of that. But I think that is really one of those underpinnings of this model of constantly doing it is we try and eliminate that shame and stigma, not only from our programs, not only to eliminating CalFresh, but also just to this idea that we have to be perfect at all times, or that there's some kind of fixed state of being that is better than another one. But like Monica said, bringing that curiosity, bringing that joy, bringing that humility, bringing that listening, that's what we're asked to do. So as long as I'm doing that, okay, I'm doing okay,
Right. I think we've learned that, we might want to set up a process or a policy that fits a trauma-informed thinking, but those things don't define to me what it means to be trauma-informed, because those things need to change and evolve and exist in a context. So we need to be nimble to be able to really be trauma-informed. And, I guess I say this because sometimes I worry that we can set ourselves up if we're like, well, that's not trauma-informed, therefore you're not trauma-informed. And I really think like we can have a not great approach or policy or process for something. That doesn't mean we're not trauma-informed. We're committing ourselves to that conversation and that evolution.
I think that's just such a good reminder for individuals and organizations as well, that there isn't, but when you're being trauma informed, it's not like, okay, well, I did all the things, so I'm good to go for the rest of my life. See you later. It's something that you constantly work at, and what works in one situation might not work in another situation. And if you're able to adapt and see the differences and see the benefits of both and appreciate the differences as well, I think that's being trauma informed. And to do that on a personal level, like you mentioned, Adrienne, but also to be able to do that on an organizational level is hard and it takes work. But as someone who joined Leahs Pantry in April of 2022, I'm already seeing the differences that our work environment has compared to other places that I've worked. So we've heard that Adrienne was making baby food in her kitchen in San Francisco. You got in touch with Monica. Y'all started working at Potrero with Bridge. And now all of a sudden we are in 2023 and Leahs Pantry holds the statewide training contract for CalFresh Healthy Living. And Adrienne, you did mention there's a good story there. So I want to bring it back and I want to hear that story of how this CalFresh Healthy Living partnership came to be.
Well, initially, we had gotten involved with CalFresh Healthy Living through the San Francisco, now SF Marin Food Bank as their nutrition partner. And that's when Monica came on board. And that was a lot of just direct community implementation of Food Smarts. We also built eatfresh.org, and we also built the Food Smarts training program. None of that was operating in any kind of a trauma-informed framework. That was just your standard SNAP-Ed, Nutrition Ed. It was good. I mean, Food Smarts is still a terrific curriculum. eatfresh.org is still a terrific website, right? But that was not the entry point. But what we did during that time was we really established very strong relationships with our funders at San Francisco Human Services Agency and also the state. When our contract ended up moving up to the state level, we had more and more interaction with the state team because eatfresh.org was a state level program. So it was more appropriate for it to live up at the state level as opposed to locally. And CalFresh Healthy Living has conferences every year, right? Times to get together and to network and to really build those relationships. And so I was very invested in my relationship with the state team. I wanted to understand more about the program strategically. I wanted to make sure I was doing smart things for my organization. And so I felt very comfortable in sharing what Monica and I were kind of up to on the side. And we were sitting and talking after a conference one day with one of the representatives from the USDA who was attending our conference. And I just kind of tongue in cheek was, well, first I was sharing about what we were doing, and then the USDA said, that sounds great. Is there any opportunity for you to bring that into SNAP-Ed? And I said, gosh, if only I was sitting next to somebody able to make that happen in SNAP-Ed, a little tongue in cheek, right? Because our contract was already executed. But in that moment, Ana Bolaños, who now has left the CalFresh Healthy Living program and is working for the Office of Health Equity, just said, yes, let's make this happen. Let's get it into your contract. I'm committed to figuring out how this works in SNAP-Ed, and we were able to make some contract adjustments and really bring Around the Table into CalFresh Healthy Living. So Around the Table was developed really in almost all partnership with CalFresh Healthy Living. And that was not originally the plan. The original plan was, we'll have to build this outside. We'll have to get other funders. And that just isn't what happened. And so the investment that the CalFresh Healthy Living program has made in Leahs Pantry's trauma-informed curriculum, training, really just thought development, has been extraordinary and has been an incredible catalyst, and then has really paved the way for those ideas to go, nationwide, because then it just becomes something that other states can do. So, I mean, thanks for bringing up partnerships, because this just wouldn't happen if we didn't have people that trusted what we were doing and were real visionaries in their own right, seeing that alignment between equity and trauma-informed care, and kind of just seeing which way the wind was blowing and wanting to do it this way. So I remain grateful till the day I die of the CalFresh Healthy Living Program and the leadership there for facilitating this, as well as, my internal team for having, doing all the work and doing all the hard thinking. But you kind of need both, right?
Mm-hmm.
you need it all.
And I just would love to point out here that by embodying a trauma-informed approach through relationship building, through transparency, through having conversations and collaboration and mutuality, you all were able to bring this trauma-informed approach onto a much bigger platform. So it's like the intersectionality of living a trauma-informed approach to bring it to more people who can then live it is kind of layering on top of each other. And I just think that's beautiful.
Totally agree with that, Colby. And as my mom always said, a closed mouth doesn't get fed. Way to put it out there in the universe and for it to come back and answer right now, right here. Okay. You don't have to get ready if you stay ready. I love that.
I just want to chime in quickly about the experience of doing this within CalFresh Snap Ed, because when we were first talking about trauma-informed stuff, before we kind of started working on the Snap Ed project, people felt like the institutions were not serving, when I would talk about trauma-informed care to educators and other, not necessarily SNAP educators, but, in other community settings, people wanted the system to be broken for us to be able to do this work. And what I found by working within CalFresh Healthy Living and Snap Ed was that there was so much you can do within something that's established that can be transformative. And that's, this idea of starting where people are at can just yield so many dividends. And I think that's been the process, with Adrian, kind of understanding how things work and how the system works and how people are doing their work, and seeking to serve that and not just redo everything and tell everyone they're doing everything wrong. People have things that work. And so really, I found that as just a very valuable experience. And I feel it feels more powerful.
Thank you for joining us today for part 1 of our discussion with Adrian Markworth and Monica Bagwan. Stay tuned for episode 2 to hear the second half of this fruitful conversation here on Stocking the Pantry.
Thank you so much for hanging with us. And I want to ask you this question. Do you know of any thought leaders or someone doing great work in your community? Well, we would love to interview them, and we'd love to hear from you. Find us online at leahspantry.org or on Instagram, handle at Leahs Pantry, or email us at stockingthepantry@leahspantry.org. This podcast is a product of Leahs Pantry, made possible by the funding from the United States Department of Agriculture and their Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, an equal opportunity provider and employer. Visit calfreshhealthyliving.org for healthy living tips.